I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in. Hi, welcome back to another episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. I am so relaxed now that the kids are back at school. I don't know if anyone else can relate to that feeling, but it's been just really tricky for me to work from home while they are at home as well. And it's not their fault. It's just that they want to do stuff. They want to eat stuff and they want to ask me for help with stuff. So, um, if any of you have experienced that too, I can really relate hard. And my advice is to take a little time for yourself if you can in the first week or two that they're back at school. Um, we deserve a break, and often we don't give it to ourselves. But it's so helpful in then being able to be calmer when we're interacting with our kids. And so I've had I the a couple of episodes ago talked about the experience of autism and how it can be, autistic kids can experience trauma a lot just through going through their everyday lives in a world set up for typical people. Um, and I had talked about coming back to that topic, or autism particularly, and understanding it and how to help kids. We've had a little bit of a break in that series while I used some guest interviews over the school holidays, because I found it hard to get my usual stuff done. Um, but I'm excited to be back to this topic. And today we're talking about why autistic kids need their Stims. That's, repetitive behaviors they might be engaging in, or echolalia, repeating their favorite phrases from things and that kind of stuff, and how that helps them regulate. I've known for a while as a psychologist that it's if we try as parents or professionals to limit kids doing this stuff, that it doesn't help, it doesn't work. um, but I think we've evolved understanding over the last decades of my work with children and families to know now that it's actually a really helpful thing. And I wanted to focus on that in today's episode. Um, these things I want to talk about it in a way that you'll understand. So I think stims is an easy way. Stimming or repetitive behavior, those things kids do over and over. And I'll get into some examples in a little bit, but they are things that kids do to regulate. Um, you probably already know, or it's jumping into your mind, if your child does this stuff, what their actual stims are. Um, and I think too often, we try to stop those things. And today's episode's all about why we shouldn't really suppress those behaviors and what we can do instead to support healthy regulation. It's not um, it's not an easy thing to do, because what it involves is dropping all of the expectations that other people set for us and our family and our children. So you hear all these voices in your head about maybe why is your kid doing that? Why aren't you stopping them? It's a bit strange, maybe, and you hear all this judgment about how other people say you should do, and so it's really hard to let that go. I want to acknowledge that, but also to say that that's what we've got to try and do, so that, because I do believe that if you can let go of all of those voices in your head and things other people say, and really just connect with your child as you know them and what they need, responding to them gets so much easier. So, I wanted to talk about regulation in autistic kids and how these behaviors and stuff is kind of a part of that regulation. I wanted to talk a bit about, so I'll give some information to help you understand that, but then also about some things you can do to help your child regulate. And then to put it into context, to kind of think about what school might be like for kids. So then you can understand what it's like when they come home from school in the afternoon. The first point I wanted to make is I think I've said it like 4 or 5 times already, but the repetitive behaviors help with regulation. So, stimming can sometimes look like flapping hands, rocking back and forth, tapping things, repeated words or phrases as well. And so, these aren't a problem. um, they can be annoying for parents sometimes, like, particularly if we've got our own sensory preferences, like a preference for no noise. That's one I have. And so things like tapping and the talking or the random little whoop noises and things like that can be quite annoying. That's a separate issue. That's for me to solve on my own. But I know that it's a child's way of calming their own nervous system. Sometimes even expressing joy, and when we understand this, we can shift from how do I stop it to how do I support it. I think you will be able to tell if your child's trying to regulate or if they're in a place of joy. And, I'm going to sidetrack for a sec and talk about how the idea for this topic came from being at the Yellow Ladybugs conference and listening to Sandhya Menon, who is from Onwards and Upwards Psychology. And she's got lots of great resources for families, so I will link those in this episode's notes. But she was talking about the idea that, you know, we're talking about how these behaviors can help kids regulate, and that's great, that serves a purpose. But shouldn't joy also be enough of a reason to let us accept these things in our kids? If it's a way that our child's experiencing and showing joy, that is such a like, it's a valuable thing in terms of a child's development because experiencing joy and positive emotions is so helpful for resilience and all of that kind of thing. But isn't it also kind of the goal of just life is to enjoy it? So, I think seeing it from that perspective can really shift how we feel about it as well. Excuse me. So that leads into why I think we shouldn't take the stimming away. Suppressing the stims kind of asks someone, um, is like asking someone to take deep breaths when they're anxious. It doesn't take that anxiety away, it just hides the signs. And so um, your child, especially if they don't have an alternative, they're it's almost like they're making an attempt to try and help themselves feel better, and we're asking them to stop that. And so, yeah, the analogy with the anxiety is a little bit like the anxiety is still there, and that will be the case too if you ask your kids to stop the stimming. But you're doing is asking them to just not show you that feeling that they have inside. So the feeling will still be there. You're taking away their attempt to regulate it. So you're just kind of shutting down the expression and the attempt to regulate that emotion. And that's what teaches kids to kind of just shut everything inside, and that eventually ends in either an outburst or complete overwhelm in the worst cases. But in the best cases too, it just teaches kids to suppress their emotions, which is not a healthy thing. And so in that way, it can be harmful for kids, and they can learn to just mask their needs instead of meeting them. I also think that these behaviors are a way of communicating as well. I mean, all behavior is a way of communicating. It may not be intentional on your child's part, but they are actually communicating to you that they're going through something difficult and regulating, or that they're really happy and they're showing it. Um, and so I always want to keep the lines of communication open with my kids. Um, and so if you look at it through that lens, it's another reason to really keep this one open between you and your kid as well. And so, um, autistic kids often have difficulty with this thing called interoception, and that's what we talk about as being the ability to notice internal signs like being hungry, thirsty, emotional states, and that kind of thing. And so, if your child doesn't feel when they are overwhelmed or they have difficulty recognizing it, it makes regulation a lot harder. We can't expect kids to use their words. First of all, when they're upset at all, kids can't do that well. But secondly, if they don't know what's happening inside, we can't expect them to explain it. And so that's another way I think these stimming and that kind of thing is a communication. It's a it's a way that kids can communicate to you what's going on and what they need. So probably you can see how this brings us to a point of thinking, but how can I help my child regulate then if they can't really explain it and I don't understand? And so I think the answer to that question is to become really curious and not focus on the behavior itself, but focus on what's happening underneath. So if you're curious about it and you can look for patterns, what things have you noticed helps your child calm down? It could be flapping their hands, it could be walking around in circles on their toes. Um, it could be, you know, running through their favorite scene in a movie out loud. Have you noticed any things that make situations worse? So, for example, maybe things like loud noises and stuff like that make it worse, and that gives you a clue that maybe your child needs some quiet time to help regulate. Once you notice those patterns, um, and again, it's about being curious, not about being right. Once you have an idea about what helps and doesn't help, then you can try that and see if it works or doesn't work and keep gathering that information. But you can start with teaching strategies like maybe using visuals to track emotions. I use a thermometer idea quite a lot, or just numbers of emotions. So there's, angry might have a 0, 1, 2, 3. So kids can maybe point to where they're feeling. They can just use the number. They might use a color, something like that, so that it's easier to communicate about it. You can also create some or create with those, you know, ideas that you have based on the patterns that you notice, create a few strategies from that about things to use at home. And so one of them might be a sensory space where kids have their favorite things to use and regulate. It might be a quiet area where they can retreat from the family when they need a bit of me time, or quiet time. You might be able to also help them name what they feel as well, and how we do that is by, you naming it first, so that you're reflecting back what you see to your child and then asking them what they might need. So, for example, you might say to your child, your hands are on your ears. Do you need a quiet place to go? And so you're kind of helping them recognize the sign and linking that with what they need. Or it could be your body looks wiggly. Do you need to bounce or stretch or move? Um, it's important to remember at this point that it's about teaching those things slowly over time and gently, not in the moment of a meltdown. That is not the time to start any conversation. That's the time to just do what your child needs to calm down. If you know what it is, do that. If you don't, come and see someone who can help you try and work that out um, with support so you don't have to work it out alone. Um, yeah. So I think, I touched on this a bit episode talking about the traumas of being autistic, but I think it's worth noticing too that school can be a trigger for dysregulation. And this might not be news to any of you listening, but for some people, just for some, it might. Many schools are loud, busy, unpredictable, and so they're really tough for kids with sensory sensitivities. The other thing to mention is that sometimes these stims aren't allowed or encouraged at school either overtly or just by the quiet expectation that everybody kind of conforms to that typical way of doing things. So if your child is doing that, they're holding it together all day at school, and then when they get home, it can be meltdown. They just can't hold it in anymore. So it's important to think about encouraging your child's teachers to understand if certain behaviors help your child regulate, and to allow them to be able to do that as part of their school day. If not, then you're taking away the skills that they have in managing their emotions, and that's um, damaging not only to how much kids can achieve at school and concentrate and pay attention, but to their overall well-being. And I do have a guide actually for parents on how you can advocate for your child at school. And so if you go to my website, which is learn.leannetran.com.au/free, that's where all of the free resources are. So it's just some advice or guidelines about how to think about advocating for your child at school. Um, some scripts of what to say and that kind of thing, because we can all, well, parents often say to me that they feel like they just don't know how to ask for what their child needs at school. So it's a bit of a guide to help you with that. So instead of seeing stimming or repetitive behaviors as something to stop, I see them as messages. It's communication. It's what your child is telling you. It's either this is how I cope, or I'm really happy and I feel joy right now. Both of those things are equally valid and worth encouraging. And so when we allow our kids to stim and encourage it, even we give them the freedom to regulate in a way that works for them. And also give them a way to express joy and happiness in a way that works for them also. I just Yeah, I love that, and I see joy in kids' faces. There's actually a big difference that I've noticed when I talk to kids about, for example, their special interests or spins. Their faces, well, I mean, all not all autistic kids are the same, obviously, but so many times when kids are telling me about what they're really interested in and they love, their faces light up and they just seem so happy. And I think that's what every kid should be feeling, happiness, and joy. That is the job of a kid. And so if we can encourage that for your kids, it's going to be so good for their resilience and their mental health and um, what they deserve as well. So next time we will talk about how to go into more detail about how to tune into what's going on for your kids so that you can tell what they need, and be able to meet those needs. But for today, let's leave it there with encouraging lots and lots of spins and stims and all of the beautiful expressions of joy that your kids show every day. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Tran Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.